In this video I'm going to show you how you can make custom CSS checkboxes. The first thing we're going to do is create a new folder for our project. Let's call it custom CSS checkbox and go into our code editor and edit. In this folder we're going to create two new files. The first one will be index.html and the next one will be style.css. And in the HTML file we're going to add some basic markup. Let's add a head tag with a title custom CSS checkbox. And let's link our style sheet as well, style.css, and let's add a body tag as well. In our body tag we will first add a main.container. Let's create our form as well, form.custom checkbox form, and we can remove the action attribute. We don't need this need that for this project. And let's start adding some inputs. Input type equals checkbox, name equals, let's say, vehicle, give it a value equals bike, and let's give it an ID as well of bike. Then we can add our label. And the reason we added our ID up here in the as an attribute in input is so that we can reference it down here in our label. So in the for attribute we can write bike, and it will look for the input with an ID of bike. Okay, let's copy this a couple of times and paste in some extra copies. Give it some different values. Boat, and let's of course remember to actually write something in our labels. Let's write bike, car, and boat. And that's basically all the markup we need. So this is what we have so far. Very basic and to be honest a little bit boring. So let's start to style it. Let's first add some basic styling to our container. Let's give it a width of 600 pixels. Let's give it a margin of 50 pixels and auto. Oops, auto. There we go. And let's change the font as well. Namely, yeah. Here we go. And that's what we have so far. Okay, so before we move on, there's one thing I want to show you. Of course, we can check off our checkboxes by clicking on them, but since we have our labels and in our markup the labels are referencing our inputs, we can actually click on our labels to check off the checkbox, and that's going to be important later. Another thing that is important to know about this is that you can't actually add styles to this checkbox, so instead we're going to do something else. Let's go into our styles and target this input, custom checkbox form, and let's target all our inputs that has a type of checkbox. And since we can't add style to it, we are gonna hide them and then instead create our own checkboxes that we can style. So display none, and they're gone. Okay, so let's add some basic styling to our label as well. Custom checkbox form, input type equals checkbox, and plus label. What this plus label means is that we are going to target the labels that are directly after this element. So in this case the labels directly after our inputs that has a type of checkbox. So if we go back to our form, our markup for a moment, and add an input of text with an ID of random text, and then add a label for random text. Now, when we begin to style this element here, this won't affect this label, as it's not right after an input with a type of checkbox. So let's remove this in and add our styles. So let's say display block and margin bottom of 10 pixels. And this will basically just put them on separate lines. Okay, so let's start to actually create our own checkbox now. Let's say custom checkbox form input of type equals checkbox plus label. And to do this, we will target the pseudo element before of the label. So we are going to write before. And when targeting a pseudo element, you always have to add a content attribute. Let's do this. We can leave it empty. You can add text here as well. You can say hey, and this will basically show up before all our labels. But we don't want to do that right now. So let's remove it. And let's start, give it a width of 20 pixels, a height 20 pixels. Let's give it a bit of border radius to give it a bit of round corners, 3 pixels. Let's give it a background color. Let's go in and find the color, flat UI colors. And let's go with wet asphalt. Paste that in and see what we have so far. Okay, so it's not actually working right now. And that is because the pseudo element right here is still an inline element, and when it's an inline level element, you can't add a width and height to it. So in order to be able to do that, we have to make it a block level element. Let's say display block. Now, so this works in the sense that it makes our checkboxes show up, but we don't really want it to show up on different lines than our label. So let's fix that by making it an inline block. And now this should be fixed. There we go. Now, next thing we want to do is add a little bit of padding between the checkbox and the label. In order to do that, let's first go up to our label again and give it a position of relative. And let's go back down to our pseudo element and say position absolute. What this does is that it allows us to position this pseudo element relative to our label. Now what we can do is say left 0, and now our pseudo element will show up at the leftmost point of our label. Let's take a look. And we can see here that's covering part of the label itself, and we don't really want that. So let's go back to our label and give it a padding left of 30 pixels. There we go, much better. The next problem is that our checkbox and our label isn't really aligning vertically. So let's fix that by saying line height 20 pixels. And much better. And now we basically have our checkboxes as we want them. The only problem is that we can't really see if the checkboxes are checked off. As mentioned earlier in the video, we can check it off by clicking on the label, and we can actually do the same with by clicking on the checkboxes. We just can't see it right now. So let's make that visible. Do that, we go to tag a new element, custom checkbox form, input of type equals checkbox, and let's use this CSS selector called checked. So that basically means that we will target all the checked elements. Checked plus label Okay, so as this is a pseudo element as well, remember we have to add content. Now this time we'll actually add something. If we write \2714, this is basically an HTML character, and let's take a look. I don't know if that's too visible. Let's zoom in a bit, but it actually displays a check mark. It worked for now, but it doesn't look great. So let's fix that. Let's change color to something else. Let's go back into our flat UI colors. Choose clouds. Paste that in. And see what we have. Okay, that's better, but it's still not perfect. So let's add a few more changes. Let's say font size 25 pixels, and line height 20 pixels, and maybe text align center. And let's have a look again. And now we're basically done. You have a fully customizable CSS checkbox. Thank you for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.